Coffee hits her face before I even understand what happened. Hot, dark, splattering across her cheek. My daughter's hands freeze mid-sentence. She was signing to me, telling me a joke about the clouds outside her window. Now her hands are pressed against her scalded skin, and her mouth is open in a silent scream that only I understand the weight of. A woman in a cobalt blue blazer stands over her, an empty cup shaking in her manicured hand. She wasn't listening to me, the woman snaps. I told her to move her arm 3 times. My daughter cannot hear a single word she is saying. My daughter is deaf. I am on my feet before I decide to stand. Passengers around us gasp. Someone drops a phone and scrambles to pick it back up, already recording. A flight attendant freezes in the aisle, drink cart forgotten. My daughter looks up at me, coffee dripping from her jaw, eyes wide with confusion and pain. Her small hands trembling as she tries to sign one word to me. Help. 20 years of training taught me how to control a room in seconds. It taught me how to read a threat before it fully forms. Right now, every instinct in my body is screaming at me to do something I have spent my entire career learning never to do in public. I breathe. I look at the woman in blue. She looks back at me, chin lifted, utterly certain she has done nothing wrong. Are you going to control your kid? She says. Or should I? I do not answer her yet, because what happens in the next 4 minutes on this airplane is going to end her life exactly as she has known it, and she has no idea who she just poured coffee in front of. But to understand why this moment changed everything, I need to take you back to where this all began. My name doesn't matter yet. What matters is that 6 hours earlier, I was just a tired father trying to get his daughter home for her birthday. Her name is Ren. She is 9 years old. She lost her hearing to meningitis when she was 2, and in the 7 years since, she has built a world for herself made of hands, expressions, and quiet observation that most people never notice. She reads rooms better than most adults I have worked with. She reads faces the way other kids read books. We were flying home from her grandmother's house in Denver, a trip we take every year around her birthday. Ren had been counting down the days for weeks. She packed her own bag. She picked her own window seat online, seat 14A, because she liked watching the wing lights blink at night. I had spent the last 2 weeks working a case that left me hollow in ways I couldn't explain to a 9-year-old. I needed this flight. I needed 3 hours of nothing but her hands moving through the air, telling me stories about her class hamster and her best friend's new bike. The badge in my jacket pocket felt heavier than usual that morning, though I couldn't have told you why. The cabin that morning felt ordinary in the best way. Sunlight through small windows, the smell of stale coffee and recycled air. A baby fussing 2 rows back before drifting off to sleep. An older man reading a paperback with cracked reading glasses. Nothing about seat 14 looked like the beginning of anything. Ren settled into her window seat, already signing to me about the shape of the clouds below us. I settled beside her, aisle seat, badge tucked away, phone off, mind finally starting to unclench for the first time in 2 weeks. For 11 minutes, everything was peaceful. Then boarding finished, and the woman in the cobalt blue blazer stopped in the aisle beside our row, staring down at her ticket like it had personally offended her. She was maybe 50, though she dressed like she was still fighting to look 40. Cobalt blue blazer, matching trousers, the fabric pressed so sharp it looked like armor. Blonde hair cut into a style that probably cost more than my flight ticket. Sunglasses pushed up on her head even though we were indoors, 30,000 feet from any sunlight. She held her boarding pass like a weapon. Before she even reached our row, she had already stopped twice. Once to inform a flight attendant that her preferred seat had been given away, and once to tell a young man in row 12 that his backpack was in her personal space, even though it was fully under his own seat. That was the first crack. The small, forgettable incident that meant nothing to anyone else on that plane. I noticed it anyway. Training does that to you. It makes you catalog small cruelties the way other people catalog small talk. "This is unacceptable," she said to the flight attendant, voice sharp enough to turn heads 3 rows away. I paid for comfort. I did not pay to be treated like everyone else. The attendant apologized and moved on the way people trained to de-escalate always do. The woman huffed, adjusted her blazer, and continued down the aisle toward us, scanning row numbers like she was hunting for something to be angry about next. Her eyes landed on Ren. Something in her expression shifted, calculating, sizing up a 9-year-old like she was an obstacle standing between her and comfort. She stopped beside our row. "This is my seat," she announced, though her ticket clearly read 14C, one row behind ours. "There's been some mix-up. I need this window seat instead." I told her calmly that this was our row, and her seat was one back. She looked at Ren, who was watching her lips with the quiet focus deaf children develop early, reading intention long before they can read words. The woman's attention lingered on my daughter 1 second too long. Dread settled into my chest like a stone dropping through water. She noticed her. "I need you to move your daughter," she said, leaning into our row without invitation. "I get motion sick unless I'm by the window." I explained, still calm, that our seats were assigned and paid for, same as hers. She scoffed, loud enough for the row ahead to turn around. "Kids get whatever seat their parents want them to have. Adults need structure. I need that window." A flight attendant appeared, drawn by the rising volume. She confirmed politely that seat assignments were final once boarding closed. The woman's jaw tightened. "I fly this airline every single month," she said. "I know how this works. Fix it." The attendant, calm but firm, repeated that nothing could be changed. The woman turned back to me, voice dropping into something colder. "You people always do this. Let your kids run the whole flight while everyone else suffers." Ren, sensing tension through vibration and expression rather than sound, reached over and squeezed my hand. I squeezed back and smiled at her, keeping my face soft, my voice steady as I signed one word. "Okay." I did not raise my voice. I did not stand. 20 years of training taught me that the loudest person in a room is rarely the most dangerous one, and reacting to noise only feeds it. The woman exhaled sharply, muttered something about entitled families, and dropped into her own seat one row back, arms crossed, glaring at the back of Ren's head like she was already plotting her next move. I made a decision in that moment. I would stay calm. I would keep Ren's birthday trip peaceful, no matter what noise came from behind us. I had no idea yet how wrong that plan would go. For the next 20 minutes, the woman simmered instead of escalating. She sighed loudly. She kicked the back of Ren's seat twice, accidentally. She complained to the flight attendant about turbulence, about the temperature, about a stranger's perfume 3 rows away. Then the drink cart arrived. Ren, excited for her birthday trip, had been drawing pictures of birthday cake on her tray table with a crayon her grandmother packed. She signed to me, laughing silently, hands moving fast. A story about the frosting color she wanted this year. Her elbow drifted slightly into the aisle as she signed, the natural motion of a child speaking with her whole body the way deaf kids often do. The woman, now holding a fresh cup of coffee handed to her by the flight attendant, stared at that small elbow like it was a personal attack. "Move," she snapped. Ren didn't respond. She couldn't hear her. "I said move your arm," the woman repeated louder. Still nothing. Ren was watching me, not her, mid-sentence in her birthday story. A woman across the aisle leaned over gently. "Excuse me, she's deaf. She can't hear you." The Karen in blue barely glanced at her. "That's not my problem. She needs to watch where she's putting her hands." An older man one row up turned around, frowning. "She's a child. Just let it go." The woman ignored him too, jaw locked, coffee cup trembling slightly in her hand as her anger climbed past reason. A teenager 2 rows back lifted his phone, angling it toward our row, recording quietly. None of us knew yet how important that footage would become. The woman leaned forward one final time, coffee cup raised slightly. "Last warning," she said. "Move your arm." Ren, laughing softly at her own joke, still hadn't noticed her at all. What happened in the next 3 seconds would end up on national news by the following week. The coffee left the cup before anyone could stop it. It splashed across Ren's cheek, her collarbone, the drawing on her tray table smearing into brown streaks. My daughter's hands flew to her face, silent shock replacing silent laughter in an instant. The cabin went still, then loud. Gasps rippled backward through the rows. The teenager's phone stayed up, capturing everything. A flight attendant rushed over, grabbing napkins, asking if Ren was burned. I was on my feet, every trained instinct in my body screaming to move fast and think faster. My hands checked Ren's skin for blisters, found none. Only heat and shock and confusion in her wide eyes. She signed to me again, shaking. What did I do wrong? Nothing. She had done nothing wrong. The woman in blue stood there, empty cup still in her hand, utterly unbothered. She wasn't listening to me, she said again, like that explained anything. I told her to move her arm 3 times. She's deaf? I said, voice flat, controlled. She cannot hear you. That's not an excuse to be rude, she snapped back. A chorus of voices rose around us. The man from row 13 stood up, furious. You poured coffee on a child. She poured it on herself, basically. The woman shot back, already spinning a story that fit her comfort. I barely tipped the cup. The flight attendant, radio in hand now, called for the lead attendant and medical assistance. More as protocol than urgency. Ren was shaken but unhurt beyond reddened skin and wounded confidence. The woman crossed her arms. This is exactly why I don't fly with children around, she muttered, loud enough for the whole cabin. No discipline anymore. I knelt in front of Ren, signing slowly, steadily. You are safe. I am here. This was not your fault. She nodded, tears gathering but not falling. Brave in the way only children forced to navigate a hearing world can be brave. I turned back to the woman in blue. She met my eyes, chin lifted, daring me to make this her problem. I made a promise to myself in that second. I would not raise my voice. I would not make a scene beyond what she had already created. But I would make sure this moment cost her everything she thought her comfort was worth. The lead flight attendant arrived minutes later, having heard 3 conflicting versions of the same 3 seconds. She asked everyone to stay calm while she sorted through what happened. The woman in blue got there first. That child startled me, she said, voice suddenly softer, more performative. I have a nerve condition. Loud movement makes me spill things. It was an accident. The lead attendant, caught between policy and pressure, nodded slowly. I understand. Let's get everyone settled. I watched the story bend in real time. A cabin full of witnesses. And somehow the woman who poured hot coffee on a 9-year-old was being offered sympathy for her nerves. She poured it on purpose. The man from row 13 insisted. We all saw it. Sir, please lower your voice, the attendant said gently, exhausted, trying to keep peace above accuracy. Ren pressed against my side, small and quiet, coffee stains drying on her shirt collar. The birthday drawing she had been so proud of sat ruined on her tray table. The attendant, under pressure from a passenger who had already threatened to write a formal complaint about harassment if she wasn't accommodated, offered the woman a seat upgrade to first class for the inconvenience. The woman accepted with a satisfied smile, gathering her bag like she had won something. She had, for 3 unbearable minutes, in front of an entire cabin. Cruelty was rewarded and my daughter's pain was quietly filed away as an overreaction. I felt the old, familiar burn in my chest, the one I had spent years learning to control instead of release. Powerlessness dressed up as patience. Injustice wearing the mask of politeness. I held Ren's hand and said nothing, but something inside me had already shifted, quiet and permanent. That was the moment I decided this woman had made the last mistake of her very comfortable life. She didn't stay quiet in first class for long. 15 minutes later, raised voices drifted back through the curtains separating the cabins. A different flight attendant appeared, tense, asking if anyone nearby had witnessed an incident involving the passenger in 2C. Word spread fast in a pressurized metal tube with nowhere else to go. The woman had apparently demanded a second drink, been told service was briefly paused for turbulence, and responded by standing in the aisle of first class, blocking the galley, insisting loudly that she knew people at this airline and would have someone fired by tonight. A first-class passenger tried to calm her, suggesting she simply wait a few minutes. She rounded on him instead. "Sit down and mind your own business," she snapped. "This airline is useless. I fly 200,000 miles a year and get treated like garbage." The flight attendant asked her to return to her seat for safety. She refused, planting herself in the aisle, arms crossed, daring anyone to physically move her. Passengers near the curtain began filming. One woman near row 4, watching the scuffle unfold, offered a quiet observation to the person beside her, loud enough for others to hear. "She's not going to stop until someone actually stops her." The captain, informed of a disruptive passenger blocking crew movement mid-flight, made the call every crew dreads making at altitude. The intercom clicked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a passenger disturbance. Please remain seated. Law enforcement will meet us upon arrival." The woman, hearing this, laughed. An actual, disbelieving laugh, like the announcement was aimed at someone else entirely. She marched back into economy, coffee incident apparently forgotten, and stopped directly in front of our row again, eyes blazing. "This is your fault," she said to me, jabbing a finger toward Ren. "If your kid hadn't startled me, none of this would be happening." Silence answered her. Real, heavy silence, the kind that fills a cabin when everyone finally understands the same thing at once. I stood slowly, calm, breathing controlled the way 20 years of training had carved into muscle memory. She looked at me, still defiant, still certain of her own untouchable comfort. "And who do you think you are?" she demanded. I reached into my jacket pocket. The cabin seemed to hold its breath with me. My fingers found the familiar weight of the leather case I had carried every day for 20 years, the one that had felt heavier than usual that morning for reasons I finally understood. I opened it slowly, no rush, no performance. The badge caught the cabin light. "Special Agent," I said quietly. 2 words. Nothing more. A ripple moved through the rows around us. The teenager lowered his phone slightly, eyes widening. The man from row 13 exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for an hour. Someone near the galley whispered, "Oh my God!" The woman's face didn't change immediately. Confusion first, the kind that comes from a story rewriting itself faster than the mind can process. Then recognition. Then fear, arriving in slow, visible stages, color draining from her cheeks, her mouth opening and closing without sound, her hands unfreezing from their confident cross and dropping limp at her sides. That's not," she started. I didn't raise my voice. "You poured a hot drink on a child. You blocked a federal flight crew during active duty. You've made threats against airline staff on a recorded federal flight." "I didn't mean," she startled me. "I have a condition." Her voice climbed, desperate now, grasping for the same excuse that had worked minutes earlier. It didn't work this time. "Ma'am," I said, calm and final, "you don't get to explain this one away." A woman near the front, watching the color drain further from the Karen's face, said quietly to no one in particular, "She really thought she was untouchable." The woman in blue opened her mouth once more, searching for anything that might undo the last 30 seconds. Nothing came out. For the first time since boarding, she had absolutely nothing to say. The plane landed 20 minutes later into a runway lined with flashing lights. 2 airport police officers boarded first, followed by airline security. I met them at the front of the cabin, badge already visible, and briefed them in the flat, precise language of someone who has given 100 briefings before. The coffee, the child, the blocked aisle, the recorded threats against crew. One of the officers glanced toward the teenager's phone. "We'll need that footage." He handed it over without hesitation. The woman in blue attempted one final defense as officers approached her row. "This is ridiculous. I have medical documentation for my nerves. I want a lawyer. I want to speak to the airline. Do you know who I—" "Ma'am," the officer said, cutting through her sentence. "You are being detained pending review of an in-flight assault and interference with crew duties." Her voice cracked on her next word. "Assault? It was an accident. We have 3 witnesses and video evidence stating otherwise." he replied. The captain's voice came over the intercom moments later, calm and clear. This passenger is being removed due to a serious in-flight incident. We appreciate your patience. A quiet wave of applause rippled through the cabin. Not celebration exactly, relief, given permission to finally exist out loud. Ren watched the officers approach the woman's row, her small hand tightening in mine. I signed to her gently. It's over. You're safe. She watched the woman being walked up the aisle, wrists gently restrained, blazer wrinkled now, none of the sharp confidence left in her posture. As she passed our row, the woman looked at Ren one last time. Something flickered across her face. Not quite apology, but something close enough to recognition of what she had done. Ren didn't look away. She simply raised her chin, small and steady, and let the woman walk past without flinching. The officer at the door offered one final line as they exited. You have the right to remain silent. For the first time all flight, the woman actually did. The cabin exhaled once the doors closed behind her. The air felt lighter immediately, the way a room feels after a storm finally passes. Passengers who had spent the flight tense and silent began speaking freely again, small conversations rising like the return of birdsong after thunder. The woman from across the aisle leaned over first, her voice gentle. Is she okay? I nodded, and Ren, understanding the tone even without the words, offered a small, tired smile. The man from row 13 stopped beside us on his way out, crouching slightly to Ren's eye level. He signed, clumsily but sincerely, 2 words he must have looked up on his phone during the chaos. You're brave. Ren's smile widened, genuine this time, some of the earlier fear finally draining from her shoulders. I checked her skin one more time, gently, the redness from the coffee already fading. No lasting damage beyond the memory itself. She reached up and wiped a spot near her collarbone, then looked at me and signed a simple question. Is it over? I nodded and meant it completely. She leaned her head against my shoulder, exhausted in the particular way children get after fear finally releases its grip. I wrapped an arm around her, feeling the tension of the last hour slowly unclench in my own chest as well. The teenager who had filmed everything walked past on his way out, offering an awkward but earnest nod. That was, I'm glad you were here, he said. I thanked him quietly, aware that his footage would matter more than either of us understood yet. Sitting there in the aftermath, watching my daughter's breathing slow back to normal, I found myself thinking about all the small cruelties that go unrecorded, unwitnessed, unanswered every single day. This one had simply happened in front of the right person, at the right moment with the right kind of proof. That thought settled into something quieter and more permanent by the time we finally stood to leave the plane. The following weeks moved faster than I expected. The footage from the teenager's phone, combined with statements from 6 other passengers, became central evidence in the case against the woman in blue. Her name, once she gave it fully to officers, turned out to belong to a regional sales director with a long private history of formal complaints against staff at hotels, restaurants, and now, finally, an airline. She was charged with assault and interference with flight crew duties, a federal offense that carries real consequences rather than mere embarrassment. Her employer, informed of the viral footage circulating within days, terminated her position within the week, citing conduct incompatible with company values. Ren, for her part, healed faster than either of us expected. The redness faded within days. The fear faded slower, but steadily, helped along by an outpouring of messages from strangers online who had seen the footage and wanted her to know she had done nothing wrong. One message from a deaf teenager in another state stayed with her the most. In it, the girl signed on video that she had experienced something similar once, and watching Ren stand tall afterward gave her the courage to speak up about her own experience for the first time. That single message changed something quiet in Ren. She began carrying herself a little differently afterward. Not louder, but steadier. The way people become once they understand their voice, spoken or signed, actually matters. As for me, the case reminded me of something I had learned long before that flight, something I had simply needed to relearn in the moment it counted most. Patience is not weakness. Restraint is not surrender. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is remain calm long enough to let the truth catch up to the loudest person in the room. The airline, in the aftermath, quietly updated staff training around disability awareness and de-escalation. A small but real policy shift born from one very bad afternoon at 30,000 feet. Which brings us back, in a way, to right now. Some people mistake silence for surrender. They see patience and assume it means someone will never push back. But real strength rarely announces itself early. It waits. It stays calm through humiliation it did not deserve. It lets cruelty rise as high as it wants to climb, because the higher it rises, the further it falls when the truth finally catches up. My daughter taught me that lesson more clearly than any training ever did. She stood in the wreckage of someone else's cruelty and simply refused to shrink. If the story reminded you that dignity outlasts every loud voice in the room, that quiet strength always wins in the end, you already know what to do. Some people never learn who they're really talking to until it's far too late.